I never truly wanted to be a doctor. I know that might sound ungrateful. Medicine is a noble and respected path, one that many dream of following. But for me, it was never a dream. It was a cage. A golden one, perhaps built with love and high expectations, but a cage nonetheless. It was a life carefully crafted for me by my parents, both accomplished surgeons, who saw in me a reflection of their legacy. They wanted me to walk the road they had paved with discipline, ambition, and sacrifice. And for a while, I did. My name is Lisa Garcia, and for the past 7 years, I've been living a carefully constructed double life. To my parents and the outside world, I'm Dr. Garcia, the bright, elegant daughter who followed in their footsteps and made them proud. But in the world I keep hidden, I'm Amy Brown, one of Boston's most sought-after contemporary artists. My abstract paintings hang in luxury penthouses and galleries, and some sell for millions. But not a single soul from my medical life knows who Amy is. And in the art world, no one has ever heard of Dr. Garcia. The irony of this secret life became almost unbearable this morning. I stood in the newly renovated wing of Metropolitan General Hospital, the place my parents have called home for over 27 years. They were glowing with pride as the hospital unveiled its new Healing Through Art initiative. And there, in the center of the grand lobby, hung a massive canvas, bold, chaotic, and pulsing with life. My painting, purchased anonymously through my gallery for $5 million. My mother, ever poised and critical, stood beside me eyeing the piece. "I don't understand modern art," she murmured, her tone laced with skepticism. $5 million for splashes of paint? The hospital board must be out of their minds. If only she knew that those very splashes would fund an entire year of pediatric care. My father, always composed in his spotless white coat, joined us and glanced at the painting with restrained indifference. "At least it adds color to the place," he said quietly. "Though I wish they had spent that money on new surgical equipment." I stayed silent. The words caught in my throat. They had no idea that I had poured my soul into that piece after a grueling 40-hour shift. Instead of collapsing into bed, I had gone straight to my hidden studio, raw with emotion. That painting held my exhaustion, my pain, my identity. But the real beginning of my story goes back 9 years, back to when I was 20 and had dared to dream out loud. I still remember the trembling in my hands as I stood in our living room, clutching my acceptance letter from one of the world's top art schools. A full scholarship. Proof that I had talent, that someone else believed in me too. My father's voice thundered before I could finish speaking. "Absolutely not," he had said, his anger shaking the silence of our home. "No daughter of mine is going to throw her life away painting pictures." The walls felt smaller that day. My mother sat silently on the leather sofa, her face carefully blank, but her eyes heavy with disappointment. "Lisa," she said calmly, "we've invested everything to prepare you for a future in medicine. The tutoring, the summer science programs, the exam prep, you owe it to us to see it through." "I never asked for any of that," I said, barely above a whisper. Tears threatened to fall, but I held them back. "I never wanted this." My father cut me off, his voice sharp and final. "You think art will pay the bills? Look at your cousin Brian. He chased his creative dreams and now he's 38, broke, and living in his parents' basement." "But I'm good at it," I whispered, more to myself than to them. "Really good." My mother stood, adjusting her perfect blouse, smoothing out wrinkles that weren't there. "You're good at science, too. Top scores. Top of your class. That's not a coincidence, Lisa. That's your true calling." What they didn't know was that I had already sold several paintings under a pseudonym. A respected gallery owner had discovered my work online and offered to represent me. That there was a fire inside me, one that couldn't be extinguished by lab reports or hospital corridors. A fire that only came alive when I stood in front of a blank canvas, brush in hand, heart racing with purpose. I've kept my two worlds apart for so long. But as I stood in that hospital lobby today, watching my mother critique the very art that sustains the hospital she loves, I felt the walls between those worlds start to crack. Maybe it's time they knew who I am, not just the daughter who followed the path they laid, but the woman who found her voice in the splashes of paint they couldn't understand. Every time I picked up a paintbrush, it felt like I was touching a part of my soul. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter to my parents. In their eyes, success only wore one outfit, a white coat. Being a doctor was the only future they could accept for me. So, when I held that acceptance letter from the Art Institute, the one that had once filled me with hope and pride, I felt it crumble beneath the weight of their expectations. I had a choice to make: follow my heart and risk losing my family, or find another way to survive in both worlds. That night, I made a decision that would shape the next 9 years of my life. I wrote a message to the art school, thanking them but politely declining their offer. Then, I accepted my spot at Preston Medical School, my parents' proud alma mater. But I didn't give up on my dream. I also sent a carefully worded email to the gallery owner who had shown interest in my work. I signed it with a name that wasn't mine, Amy Brown. "I'll need to work in complete secrecy," I wrote. "No photos, no interviews, no public appearances. But I'll keep painting." His reply came quickly. "Intriguing. Mystery can be powerful. Send me your next piece, we'll begin." And that was the beginning of my double life. By day, I was a medical student, memorizing anatomy and learning how to save lives. By night, I transformed into Amy Brown, painting in a tiny studio I rented under a different name. That space became my sanctuary. It was where I let everything out: the stress, the exhaustion, the pressure of living a life that wasn't entirely mine. And somehow, the more intense my life became, the more powerful my art grew. The first year was the hardest. Medical school was every bit as demanding as my parents had warned. There were nights I felt like I would completely fall apart. But instead of quitting, I poured those emotions into my work. My paintings became more raw, more honest, almost painful. Critics began to notice. They called my style visceral, emotional, and strangely surgical in its detail. If only they knew how many hours I spent studying the human body in my textbooks. My first big sale happened during my second year of medical school. A triptych sold for $240,000. I remember dancing alone in my studio that night, completely silent, overwhelmed with joy. I couldn't tell a soul. That same evening, my parents called to celebrate my perfect score on a pathology exam. They were so proud. I let them talk, pretending to share in their joy, all while knowing that they had no idea who their daughter was. The years that followed were a blur of long hospital rotations, sleepless nights, and quiet painting sessions in my studio. I pushed myself to succeed in both lives. And I did. At school, I became one of the top students. At the gallery, Amy Brown's mysterious identity and hauntingly emotional art became the talk of the city. My paintings were selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars, then millions. Collectors loved the mystery. "Your work," one famous critic wrote, "feels like it's done by someone who understands people on a scientific level, but expresses it like a poet." I smiled when I read that. If only he knew how many hours I spent reading medical charts before picking up a brush. By the time I graduated medical school, I had earned enough through my art to buy a private island. Not that I could ever tell my parents that. Instead, I quietly accepted a residency at their beloved Metropolitan General Hospital. I kept painting, of course, but in secret, always in secret. The balancing act was exhausting, but something unexpected happened along the way. I realized that being a doctor made me a better artist. And being an artist made me a better doctor. Understanding the human body helped me create stunning visual detail in my paintings. At the same time, my creative soul helped me connect with patients in ways my fellow doctors couldn't. I noticed things others missed. I listened more closely. I felt more deeply. Still, every time my parents bragged about their daughter, the doctor, every time they reminded me how proud they were that I had chosen medicine, I thought about the gallery show opening in Boston under the name Amy Brown. I thought about the paintings selling for millions, paintings filled with the very emotions I wasn't allowed to express at home, and then came this morning. We stood in the grand lobby of the newly renovated wing of their hospital. the hospital where they had worked for over 27 years. The hospital they helped build. They were there for the launch of a new initiative called Healing Through Art. And right in the center of the lobby, hanging on the wall like a beacon of color and emotion, was one of my most recent paintings. Bold, explosive, full of movement and life. Purchased anonymously, of course. My mother stood beside me, studying the piece with a puzzled expression. "I don't understand this modern art," she said, wrinkling her nose. $5 million for splashes of paint? The board must be out of their minds. If only she knew. My father joined us, his white coat spotless as always. "Well," he said, "at least it adds some life to the place. But honestly, they could have spent that money on better equipment." I said nothing, just stood there silently, the truth burning just beneath the surface. If only they knew those splashes of paint were mine. That they had come from the same hands they had trained to hold a scalpel. The same hands that had once held an acceptance letter to art school, crumpled and thrown away in sacrifice. Now, those same hands create beauty that helps heal differently, and maybe, just maybe, one day they'll understand. For years, the true value of their daughter's artwork remained a mystery. No one, not even her parents, realized that the same paintings they casually dismissed held the potential to fund the very pediatric care program they had spent decades struggling to expand. But everything changed the day I decided it might finally be time for Amy Brown, the secret identity I had hidden behind, to step into the light. What I didn't expect was how quickly everything would unravel once that decision was made. The choice to reveal who I was didn't come suddenly. It was like creating a painting, each moment layered on top of the last until the picture became too clear to ignore. It started with little things, an offhand comment here, a raised eyebrow there. But it was my father's harsh critique of a painting in the hospital lobby that finally tipped the balance. He didn't know that the painting he criticized was mine, one of my most personal pieces. What he also didn't know was that another one of my works, even more meaningful, was being unveiled that very evening at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Still wearing my white lab coat, standing in the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway of the hospital, I glanced down at my phone. 5 missed calls from Paul, my gallery owner. Then a text lit up the screen. "Major problem with tonight's unveiling. Need to speak ASAP." My stomach sank. I ducked into a quiet consultation room and called him immediately. "Paul, what's going on?" His voice came through tense and shaken. "The Times is publishing a story about Amy Brown. Someone talked. They think they've figured out who you are." My heart dropped. "That's impossible. Only you know." "It wasn't me," he said quickly. "But someone at the hospital noticed. They saw that you're never scheduled during major art shows. They noticed the surgical detail in your paintings. They've put it together. They think Amy Brown is you." The walls felt like they were closing in. 7 years of careful secrecy were about to come undone because I hadn't been careful enough with my shift schedule. "Can we stop them?" I asked, almost whispering. "They're running the story tonight unless we comment. We have 2 hours." Through the consultation room's small window, I saw my parents walking together, just as they had every day for the past 27 years. Confident, respected, proud doctors. I'd built a life trying to be both the perfect daughter they wanted and the anonymous artist I needed to be. But now those two worlds were colliding. As I sat there trying to make a decision, my pager went off. Emergency in the pediatric ward. I ran down the hallway, still deep in thought. If the story broke, everyone would know, my coworkers, my patients, my parents. The emergency was an allergic reaction. Serious, but manageable. I administered the epinephrine and comforted the frightened child. As the boy clung to his stuffed elephant and his breathing returned to normal, his mother looked at me and said, "Thank you. He was so scared, but you made him feel safe." I looked around at the blank white walls of the pediatric wing, cold, empty, nothing like the warm and colorful artwork I had painted and anonymously donated to the hospital lobby. At that moment, something shifted. I realized that I wasn't good at my job because I had followed the path my parents set for me. I was good at it because I brought all of myself to the work, including the artists they had never fully accepted. I stepped out into the hallway and called Paul back. Don't try to fight the story, I told him. In fact, tell them Amy Brown will be at tonight's unveiling. In person. For the first time ever. There was a pause. Are you sure? This will change everything. Everything's already changing, I said. It's time I take control of it. For the first time in my career, I requested an emergency evening off. My supervisor was surprised. I was known for never missing a shift. But with a nod, she approved it. Then, with a racing heart and trembling fingers, I picked up the phone and called my parents' office. Mom, Dad, I need you to come to the Metropolitan Museum of Art tonight. There's something you need to see at the museum, I told my mother. She sounded confused. Abigail, we have dinner plans with the hospital board. Please, I interrupted. This is more important. After a short pause, my father asked, what time? At home, I opened the hidden closet where I kept my Amy Brown identity. Unlike my usual doctor's clothes, these were artistic and bold. I chose a silk dress I had painted myself, each brushstroke part of my story. Tonight's painting was different. It was personal. Titled Daughter of Medicine, it showed a woman in a white coat whose shadow was an artist. Medical tools became paintbrushes, hospital halls turned to color, and a heartbeat monitor glowed in gold. I had painted it during late-night ICU shifts, mixing exhaustion and passion into every layer. Paul texted. The Times agreed to delay the story, but rumors were already spreading online. I looked at myself in the mirror, artist and doctor combined. Let them talk, I said. The museum was full, buzzing with speculation. I saw my parents near the entrance, unaware. The painting was still under a velvet cover. Paul whispered, last chance to back out. I shook my head. As the director spoke, I walked toward my parents. Mom, Dad, I said softly, there's something I need to tell you. The curtain dropped behind them. I'm Amy Brown. They stared, stunned. Cameras flashed. Their world shifted. And before they could say a word, something else happened. Something none of us saw coming. It only lasted a few seconds, but the silence felt endless, heavy, stretched like the whole world was holding its breath. Then, suddenly, everything shattered into noise and light. Camera flashes burst like fireworks, reporters shouted my name, and the crowd surged forward, eager to get closer to the newly revealed identity of Amy Brown. But I couldn't move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the faces of my parents. My mother, always so composed, cracked first. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. This is impossible. You're a doctor. I'm both, I said quietly, even as people pressed in around us. I've always been both. Before they could respond, another figure pushed through the crowd. Dr. Michael Jackson, chair of the hospital board, was red-faced, breathless, and visibly excited. The painting in the hospital lobby, he said, almost shouting, the one unveiled this morning. That was you? I nodded. He froze. Then came words I didn't expect. We have to pull out of the purchase. We can't accept a $5 million donation from one of our residents. The crowd erupted again. Journalists scribbled notes. Photographers snapped wildly, and I heard someone mutter the headline out loud. Dr. Artist donates millions to her own hospital. But then, my father's voice rose above the chaos. Donation? He asked sharply, turning to Dr. Jackson. What donation? Dr. Jackson blinked, confused. The purchase price, the $5 million from the painting. It was donated back to the hospital anonymously and earmarked for the pediatric care program. We assumed it came from some wealthy benefactor. He trailed off. The realization hit him mid-sentence. My father turned to me, his face unreadable. How many other paintings? Paul stepped forward smoothly and professionally, as always. 40 major pieces to date. Total sales are nearing 50 million. Amy Brown is the most successful contemporary artist under 40. My mother staggered slightly, and I saw one of the senior art critics nearby all but glowing with excitement. The detail, the anatomical precision, it all makes sense now, he said. She paints like a surgeon. Actually, I corrected softly, I practice medicine like an artist. Then came the second surprise of the evening. Dr. Betty Garcia, my chief resident, emerged from the crowd. Her eyes were full of tears. "The Brian case," she said, voice trembling. "That diagnosis you made. The one no one else saw. You said you noticed a pattern." I nodded, instantly remembering. A young patient with symptoms that didn't seem to connect. But I had seen something familiar, not in a textbook, but in a painting. The colors, the shapes, the balance. It reminded me of a principle from color theory, complementary patterns hiding an unseen gap. That gap had led to the answer. "You see things differently," Dr. Garcia continued. "That's why your diagnostic rate is so high. You don't just analyze symptoms. You see them like an artist sees the canvas." There was a long pause, and then, to my surprise, my mother spoke again. "Like an artist," she repeated, softer now. For the first time, I saw something new in her face. The shock hadn't left, but now there was something else too. A glimmer of understanding. My father hadn't spoken. His hands were folded tightly behind his back, his posture controlled and distant. I recognized that stance. It was how he stood in operating rooms, focused, disciplined, holding himself still while his mind worked at full speed. The museum director tried to regain control, calling for attention so the official unveiling of Daughter of Medicine could continue. But I barely heard him. My entire world had narrowed to the man I had tried so hard to prove myself to. Slowly, my father walked forward. He stopped in front of the painting. His eyes studied every part of it, the same way he once studied X-rays, looking for clues, for answers. I held my breath. "The anatomy," he said, finally. His voice was low, a little rough. "Every muscle, every proportion, it's perfect." "Yes," I replied, stepping up beside him. "Because I learned it from you." He turned to look at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw tears in his eyes. His voice was barely a whisper. "All these years, we thought we were teaching you how to be a doctor. I had been learning to become something more, someone who could hold two dreams at once." My mother slipped her hand into mine as we stood in the hospital lobby. She looked up at the large painting on the wall, her eyes misty with recognition. "You didn't just donate the money," she said softly. "You chose this spot because it's where you both stop every morning." I nodded, finishing her thought. "I wanted to bring a little beauty into your daily routine, even if you never knew it came from me." Flashes from cameras still lit up the room. Reporters kept shouting their questions, hungry for headlines. But in that moment, it didn't matter. It was just us, three people finally seeing each other clearly, not as roles but as family. Then Paul stepped forward, a little hesitant. "Abigail, the buyers are waiting. Daughter of Medicine, it's already received offers well beyond the asking price. They want to know, will you still sell it now?" Before I could answer, my father spoke up. His voice, calm, commanding, cut through the noise. It carried the weight of 27 years in the operating room. "No," he said, turning to face the crowd. "This painting belongs here. In the hospital, right next to the other one. People need to see what happens when you stop making someone choose between two parts of who they are." "Dad," I started to protest. "It's worth millions." He smiled, and it was a smile I'd never seen on him before. A mix of pride, regret, and quiet awe. "So is my daughter," he said. The story went viral overnight. Doctor by day, millionaire artist by night. The world couldn't get enough. Critics were fascinated by how medicine had shaped my art. Doctors were intrigued by how art had sharpened my medical intuition. The hospital even launched a new program, integrating art therapy into patient care, and asked me to lead it. Now, my paintings hang not only in galleries but also in healing spaces, on white walls where fear and hope walk hand in hand. I became the bridge between two worlds I once thought could never meet. My parents are still adjusting. Sometimes they look at me as if I'm someone new, but more often, I catch them staring at my work, both medical and creative, with wonder. Last week, I found my father standing silently before the lobby painting. He was mid-rounds, still in his white coat. "I was wrong," he said, without looking away. "When I told you that art wasn't a real future, I thought I was protecting you. But I almost stopped you from becoming who you were meant to be. I stood beside him. 3 doctors in white coats, side by side. You didn't stop me, I said gently. You taught me discipline, precision, and how to understand people. I just used what you gave me on a different kind of canvas. He laughed, really laughed. The kind that lifts something off your chest. Your mother's thinking about taking art classes, he added. Says she wants to understand your world better. It was always the same world, I whispered. I just needed everyone else to see it too. Now, when people ask me, are you a doctor or an artist? I simply smile. I tell them, I'm both. I refuse to be defined by other people's limits. My medicine heals the body. My art heals the heart. But both are born from the same place, a deep need to make the world a little brighter, a little more whole. And my parents? They finally see that success doesn't always wear a white coat. Sometimes it's splattered with paint. There's a plaque beneath that painting in the hospital lobby now. It carries both my names, Dr. Abigail Garcia and Amy Brown. A reminder that we are all more than the labels we're given. We just have to be brave enough to show our true colors. And in the quiet corner of my once hidden studio, a blank canvas stands ready. Because this isn't where my story ends. It's simply the beginning of a new chapter, finally signed with the name that feels like mine.